Hi everyone and welcome to the 5th episode of my stream. This is going to be an extra special one because I'm playing at the ladies only table. This is a first for me. Actually, I did play in a ladies free roll before, but the level was very low. And when I say very low, I mean I made the bet and then my opponent said, "Can I check now?" So yeah, I expect a bit more competition in this cash game. The stakes are not gonna be very high, we're just playing 2-5 run, but hopefully the vibe is gonna make up for the stakes. I'm quite excited here, so let's see how it goes. First hand I play, I'm on the straddle, and I ISO to 35 versus a limp on the big blind with Jack 9 offsuit. We see a nice flop of King Queen 9, but really not much reason to bet here. I check back and the turn brings me a straight. I don't think my opponent has much here, so maybe I should check and hope she finds some river bluffs. However, I go for a small, tiny bet, hoping to get called by some pairs, but she quickly folds. Second hand, Yulia opens the cutoff to 15, Roxana calls the button, and I decide to call the small blind with King 6 suited, not really expecting squeezes often or much fold equity to 3 bets. Greta comes along, and we go 4 ways to a flop of King 7-3. It checks to Yulia, who goes for a 25 c-bet. I call with my top pair, and Greta also calls with her flush draw. Turn pairs the 3, and Yulia continues betting quite quickly. At this point, I think it's very unlikely I'm good here when she continues betting into 2 people and there's also Greta left to act behind, so I decide to make what shows up to be a good fold. Ale opens to 30 over my 10 straddle and I decide to defend the big blind with 9-7 offsuit. Board comes down 8-7-5 and I go for a small bet to get thin value or equity denial from some overs and control the size of the pot. She calls and the turn is a jack. I go for another small bet of 35 for pretty much the same reasons. She calls once again, the river is a queen, and now it goes check. I don't expect to win often, but I'm good at showdown against the missed nut flush draw and the pair. Next one, I open hijack with king jack off, Carmen calls the button, and board comes down queen 8-8. Not the greatest one, but however, I was hoping she's wide enough for us to make a small c-bet here. I bet 30, but Carmen surprises me with a raise to 90, and I have to let it go. Catalina opens the small blind for 25. I pick up ace jack off, probably one of the best hands I've seen tonight, in the straddle, and I go for a 3-bet. She calls, the ace-king 4 flop makes me quite happy and I go for a small c-bet. I could do different things here, but I think this is fine. She calls and we see a 3 of spades turn. I think I definitely have a value bet here. I make it 150 and my opponent asks, why would I make it so big with an ace? She calls, river is the 9 of spades, and even though the flush gets there, Catalina doesn't have much left behind, and especially having the ace of spades, we definitely have to go for value here. We put her all in, and she decides to bluff catch with a king, winning us the first significant pot of the session. Greta limps on +1, small blind and big blind limp too, and I guess I overestimate my fold equity when I decide to go for a 50 ISO with queen 8 suited. Everyone calls, which is not great, and we see a ace 9-5 flop. Betting here out of position with so many people behind sounds kinda suicidal, so we check. Everyone checks behind and we see a jack turn. Once no one bets the flop, they are less likely to have a very strong hand here. I also pick up a gut shot, so I try a bluff of 75, planning to bluff a decent amount of rivers if we ended up heads up. Greta and Roxana call, the river comes a 7, and now Roxana leads for about half pot. For a moment, I consider raising, but I just don't think that's a good play here, so I just fold. I open ace-jack off to 35 from +1, and Greta 3-bets very small from hijack. We don't have a great hand to call out of position, but against such a small size, I give it a go. We miss the queen a3 flop, and we face a small bet of 40. I decide to get a bit frisky and go for a check raise, thinking she has a decent amount of give-ups. However, Greta has kings and she puts me all in. I now have to fold. Yulia opens cutoff to 15, Roxana flats the button and I go for a standard 3-bet with ace-queen off from the small blind. Yulia folds, but Roxana comes along. Flop, king 10 and we go for a small c-bet of 60. Roxana puts in a raise to 160. I saw she can get quite aggro and I think it's very unlikely she raises a king for value, so I get it in with my ace-queen, trying to deny equity from bluffs, and I might even get some value from some flush draws or straight draws. She has complete air, so she folds. Next hand I make a straddle to 40 for a reason I don't really remember. Carmen raises the small blind to 80, and as this is a min raise and there's some dead money in the pot, I should probably continue any two cards. Therefore, I call my 10-4 offsuit and we see a flop of Jack-Jack 4. Carmen goes straight all in for a little bit over pot. I think she would probably bet smaller with the Jack, and in that case I think I have enough equity to call. We call, and luckily we hold against Ace-Queen. I open 7-6 suited to 30 from +1, the button, big blind and straddle come along, and we see a flop of Queen Deuce 3. Same thing, I don't want to put in a bet here with such a weak hand multi-way, so it checks around. Turn pairs the 3 and it checks to me once again. At this point I can probably steal the pot with a small bet, so I put in 30, but this time Roxana continues. Luckily, river is a 6, bringing us some showdown value, so I just check back and win against a missed gut shot. Next one, +1 and cut off limp, I make it 50 in the big blind, straddle completes, but the limpers fold. We now go heads up to a flop of 10-7-5 with clubs. Not the greatest board, and not holding a club, I decide to just check. Greta checks back, and the turn comes the deuce of diamonds, now bringing us a flush draw. I bet 100, which I don't really like, I think I should make it a bit bigger. Greta calls, and the river pairs the deuce. With so many draws missing, I don't think I have much fold equity, and I check, hoping sometimes I win at showdown versus missed draws, but Greta has a 7, and she takes the pot down. Yulia opens the hijack to 20, I 3-bet the button to 70 with ace-jack, and Greta cold calls the small blind. Yulia folds, and we see the flop heads up once again. Board comes ace-king 9. Knowing Greta can be quite wide and aggressive, I go for a tricky check back, hoping she bluffs some turns. The plan works. Turn is a 9 and Greta goes for a 50 bet. We call, and the 8 river brings Greta a pair, so she stops bluffing. We put in a 200 value bet, but she finds the fold. Hand 15, the hand of the night, Roxana opens +1 to 35. I decide to just flat ace-4 suited on the hijack, as I don't think I have much fold equity, and also the opponents in position seemed quite uninterested in the pot. Everyone in position folds, but the blinds and straddle come along. We see a lovely ace-10-4 flop, and it checks to me. I go for a 75 value bet. I do think I should bet slightly bigger though. Only Roxana calls, the turn pairs the ace, and it's time for a serious value bet. I go for 250 into 325, and Roxana catches a flush draw, so she calls. On the 6 river, I put Roxana all in, and after some thinking, she decides to bluff catch, bringing us the sweetest pot of the night. Right the next hand, Yulia opens hijack to 20, Roxana flats cutoff, and I squeeze the button to 80 with my king-queen off. Lama on big blind cold calls, Yulia and Roxana come along, and the pot is already quite nice. So what's better than a Jack-10-9 flop? A Jack-10-9 flop where my opponent goes for a lead shove for almost 2 pots. I happily call, and Lama folds after some thinking. Unfortunately for her, Roxana is almost dead again, and we scoop another nice pot. Carmen opens the cutoff to 35, I call ace-9 offsuit on the straddle, and the board comes down quite lucky at the first glance. Ace-9-8, bringing us top 2 pair. Carmen goes for a big bet, which I'm super happy to see. She makes it 60, I raise 200, and she quickly goes all in for 640. I call, and I now realize I don't have as much equity as expected. Carmen holds top pair plus nut flush draw. We run it twice. First turn, 6 of spades brings her the flush. On the second board, she hits the 7 of spades on the river again, and we lose twice. Greta opens under the gun. Yulia 3-bets the small blind to 80, and I go for a 4-bet to 250 with my queens. Greta goes all in for 1.3k. I think my hand is strong enough to get it in, but I'm not that happy anymore. We call and run into kings. We run it twice once again. First board, a6, 9, king 6, I have no chance. But on the second one, I hit quads or 5 of a kind if you count me, and we luckily split the pot. Last hand of the night, Yulia opens cutoff to 15, Roxana calls the button, and I decide to see a flop from small blind with Jack-10 off, which is not the most disciplined play. Greta also calls big blind. We completely miss the ace-8-5 flop, and we all check to the 8 turn. It checks to Yulia, and she now goes for a 35 bet. I saw her betting thin on flops before, so I doubt she has either an ace or an 8. Therefore, I decide to go for a smallish check raise to steal the pot, and it works. Alright, so this was the game. I ended up as the biggest winner. And yes, I do have more experience, but also we need to admit I run like a god. I really enjoyed the table. The casino staff made it even nicer. They made sure to make it a super nice stream by bringing us cake and flowers and other nice surprises. So overall, a really, really nice experience. In the next episode, we're gonna see a super crazy bounty game, very crazy all in, so yeah, stay tuned for that one.